Hi, Professor. My name is Michaela Harmon, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the crimes and the theory that I feel best fits Ted Bundy. So before I get into this, while I was doing this project, I actually learned a lot about Ted Bundy that I didn't know, and some of it made me feel a little uneasy. So just in case you don't know everything about Ted Bundy, or you've never read into how horrific his crimes are, either way, just kind of listen to this with a little bit of warning. It does get a little graphic. I didn't put I tried to avoid a lot of the graphic nature just because I know that it can be weird for people to hear, but I did do my best in describing all of the crimes. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is his early life. Honestly, from what I was able to find, Ted Bundy didn't have a crazy life. No active abuse, nothing, no bullies, nothing that would have made any of these harsh tendencies come to life. He was born in November 24th, 1946 to Eleanor. He kind of grew up though thinking that his grandparents were his real parents, and that was kind of weird for me to find out. And then as a child, he kind of figured out that his mom wasn't his sister, and so he moved with her to Tacoma, Washington, with a guy named Johnny. And this guy would end up marrying his mother and legally adopting Bundy, and actually becoming one of the first actual father figures he had, considering his grandparents were not his real parents. At 14, he found his birth certificate only to see the unknown took up the space next to his father's name. It was that day he found out that he was illegitimate. And honestly, I know what you're thinking, that seems like it could mess up a child. And I see that, but honestly, like I said, he had a fairly decent childhood, nothing crazy. It was found that he had an occasional violent streak with his grandfather, but it was nothing too crazy. Not that any, neglect from a parent is good. His parents would take him to church every Sunday. He did well academically. He even participated in school events and ran for student office. He was very athletic. He played football with his friends and skied every weekend. And it was even said that he was really good at both of those activities. Ted never understood why he felt so out of place when everybody liked him and he did well in school. Even with the football and the skiing trips and the student councils that he ran for, he never really came out of his shell. He did admit that he was jealous of everybody who did better than him financially because it made him feel as though he had a disadvantaged start to life compared to those with money and successful parents. So when did it all change? That's honestly the most important question. As somebody who had a semi-normal childhood with only the occasional, rough parts, he wasn't bullied. So when did all of this change? Why did he become such a harsh killer, a violent killer? So in my paper, you'll see that I talked about a lot of the personality disorders that Bundy has. I mentioned him here on the slide because it is important to know that is a lot of the reason why he was who he was. So honestly, I did not know about Karen Sparks. I had actually had to dig into a couple of different scholarly articles to find her. I had no idea. It was super interesting for me to learn that one of his first victims, if not the first victim, was 18-year-old Karen Sparks. Karen was a student at University of Washington when Bundy broke into her apartment, sexually assaulting her and beating her. She ended up surviving the attack, but she sustained severe brain damage and has no memory of what happened to her. Now, just my first initial thought when I heard this was, I can't tell if not remembering is a blessing or a curse. I can't tell if that poor girl got a break, a lucky break, if you could even consider that lucky, or if that could be the worst thing ever. So, the first confessed murder was Linda Ann Healy, whose life he took a month after Karen's. So Linda was also a student of University of Washington when Ted broke into her apartment and abducted her on February 1st. Now, I didn't put all of this in here because I didn't want to focus on just one victim, as all of them are important. But I even found out that Linda was a psychology major, like me, and she loved to help people. And I just kind of help but think that I like to help people. So it's kind of crazy to see how that happened. And like they're a month apart at the same school. Like that has to be super scary. And it actually turns out that he lived 3 blocks away from the young woman. So it will never be able, we'll never be able to find out if he was stalking her or if it just happened by terrible luck. So he ended up confessing to the murders of 30 women. And it is even said by professionals that that number could be higher, like in the hundreds. So I kind of had to sum up a lot of what he's done. But he ended up committing 8 murders in the span of 7 months. This includes Linda and Karen that I talked about previously. The other women who lost their lives are Donna, Susan, Brenda, Georgianne, Denise, and Roberta. These women suffered the same gruesome fate as Linda and Karen, but the only bright side of it all was that these women were able to show police that he had a type, as it seemed that all of his victims to this point were in their early 20s with long dark hair with a middle part. Now, like I said, I had to kind of pick and choose what victims I was able to put in here, and I'm genuinely sorry about that, as all of them are important. So I decided to focus on one of the most violent crimes, which is the Chi Omega case. After escaping police custody twice, Bundy was walking the streets once again. On January 15th, 1978, Ted Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority where he strangled 2 women, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, to death, and he also severely beat Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner. He also, after he left Chi Omega sorority, he went down the street and broke into the apartment of Cheryl Ann Thomas. He broke her jaw and severely severed a nerve ending near her ear. This was a quote that I found in one of my sources, and it's about the Chi Omega sorority death. One victim was found with her brain exposed from a blow to her forehead. He had sodomized the other dead girl with a Clairol hair spray bottle. I know, like I said, I had to sum it up a lot, but the theory that I found that best fit Ted Bundy was the arousal theory. I think this theory fits him best because it states that people are driven to perform actions to maintain a high level of psychological arousal. Ted admitted that an entity takes over his body while he is hurting these women, and that entity is driven by sex. And believe it or not, that's actually, it's not worded the same way, but that's actually a quote coming from him that I sourced at the very end of this, cited at the very end of this. And I even talk a lot about it in my paper that you could see more on that. And so, while it is no excuse whatsoever, he commits these violent acts to reach a certain level of stimulation, a certain level of pleasure. He gets pleasure from killing and harming these women. And that's why he does it. He doesn't care who he has to hurt or who he has to go through. He's going to do whatever he can to make himself feel good. And here are my sources. And honestly, I'm really sorry that this video is a little shaky. I wasn't sure what the best way to go about this was. If you need me to redo anything, if you have any questions, I'd be more than grateful and appreciative to redo and or fix anything. And again, I'm really sorry for my repetition. I kind of struggled with this video, but in the end, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something about him, Ted Bundy, and I hope you have the best break ever, and thank you for being such a cool professor.